Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we're going to be working on this 2015 Honda Accord. The alternator's gone out on it, so today we're going to be replacing it with a rebuilt OEM alternator. So stay tuned. So the alternator on this 2014 Honda Accord Sport finally went out. This is the 4-cylinder version. This car's got about 120,000 miles on it. So it's about time that it finally went out. I think these Honda alternators are a little bit less reliable than equivalent like Toyota Denso ones. I think these are Mitsubishi, like the belt manufacturer, I think, makes these alternators. So before you start this project, you make sure you have all the tools and everything that you might need to do this. So what we're going to need is a 17 to get that right there, that hex. And then right above that, or right next to that, there's actually a T50 Torx that you're going to need to take that pulley off. That's the tensioner pulley that keeps the belt onto the alternator. Aside from that specialty T50 Torx, the only other thing you really need is the 14 right there that releases the top bolt. And then you just unplug a few harnesses. Right here, all these harnesses, they actually have a little bracket. You don't even have to unclip these. You can just unscrew those and then just take the whole thing off together as a bracket. One of the wires goes to the AC compressor down there, and then two of these wires are for the alternator, and you can just get that out of the way. Make sure you disconnect your battery because the positive on the battery is actually connected right to this one. So once you unbolt this, it's going to actually short if you touch any metal. So make sure you unbolt that and unbolt the battery. So the alternator we're going to replace today is this remanufactured one that we got locally here in Orlando from one of these shops. All it is just a remanufactured OEM one that someone turned in as a core. They cleaned it up, pretty much painted everything. We replaced most of the wear components like the electronics, the inside stuff, and just some of this stuff out here after they cleaned it up. But yeah, if we had more time, we probably would have ordered one online that's an actual OEM one, but since we were crunched on time, we ended up picking up this thing locally here. So yeah, as you can see on the new alternator, we have the bolt up here, which is a 14 that's going to take it off. On the bottom here, there's also another 14 millimeter that bolts it to the engine block. So those are really the only two that hold this thing onto the engine. Everything else is a tensioner and other stuff inside the engine that we're going to show you in a little bit. As far as the belt goes, we're going to go ahead at the same time having it all taken apart. We're going to replace it with this OEM belt right here from Honda. You could pretty much pick up this thing from Honda, or you could actually look at the brand right here. So all it is a Bando 7PK1440. So you can actually pick up the aftermarket version of this, which is basically the same belt from Bando, but when they actually make it for the OEM, they actually have the part number on it, but essentially it's probably the same belt. Another thing that I noticed while we're in here, this is a 10-year-old car with over 120,000 miles. You can see the valve cover gasket starting to break down and leak out. So that's usually a pretty easy replacement. You unbolt all the 10 millimeters around the valve cover and you can pretty much take it off and replace it pretty easily. The only thing with these newer engines is you've got all this plastic on top, you've got all this covers. In addition, you have all the coil packs and everything. You just gotta be careful when you're unbolting and unplugging all of that, if you're gonna go ahead and do that, because those plugs and everything are pretty brittle and you'll probably end up breaking them just like on the Toyotas. So to unbolt the main lug right there, I think is a 12 millimeter. So we want to go ahead and unplug that after. Make sure your battery is disconnected. Okay. So to remove the belt, you actually have to tighten it down, and then you see it move, the tensioner, and then you slide the belt right off. That's what that 17 millimeter right there is for. You just get 2 wrenches in there to get some leverage, just to slide it out, and then you move the tensioner back. So now we have room to unbolt the tensioner. So when you get that T50 Torx into that hole, this thing's gonna be pretty tight, so you wanna make sure you get a ratchet in there with probably a breaker bar just to make sure you have enough leverage. So you can see it's kind of tight in there as far as the angle and the room that you have to work with the frame rail. because you also have this AC line that you have to deal with. Make sure you get a pretty skinny ratchet in there with a breaker bar. Oop, there. Yep, once you break it off, you can do it by hand after that. Make sure. Yeah, after about 2 or 3 turns, then you can do it by hand. When you're doing this, be careful with the AC line. You don't want to rub it too much and wear it down or accidentally nick it. Once you get it out, you're gonna go right up against the frame rail, so you might have to wiggle it and pull the socket off the Torx head so you can actually get your ratchet out of the way so you can pull it out. So we wiggled it out, so now you actually have to turn it by hand just to get the last couple threads out and then pull it out. One more screw you gotta take out is at the bottom of the tensioner. So the best way to take this out is to use the deep socket and a regular ratchet to break it loose. Once we break it loose, we'll use a smaller ratchet to get it out so it doesn't get stuck. It's right below the alternator. It's like a little ram tensioner down there that you can see. Or just take it out if you want. You slide it out sideways. Get the rest of the belt out of the way. Put that down. Here's a tensioner right here. This thing is still stuck inside, but figure we can just leave it on here. Once we tighten it down, it'll probably pop loose. We got everything pretty much clear now. Let's get this 14 millimeter on top. All right, down at the bottom there's one more 14 millimeter that we have to unbolt. We thought it shared the same thing as a tensioner, but it's its own bolt, so you gotta get that. You probably need an extension for this and a deep socket. Once you loosen that, the whole thing pivots out, and pretty much loosen it and just pull it out. All right, last bolt, we lift the whole thing out. So here's the old one. We're gonna go ahead and transfer that heat shield over to the new one and transfer anything else that your alternator may not have on it. So here's the new one and the old one side by side. So on the OEM alternator, the only real marking that you can see is the part number right here and the Honda information on that thing. On the rebuilt one, obviously they've removed all that and painted over it all. The rest of the plugs and everything, this looks like the factory OEM one here. And on the rebuilt one, it's the factory OEM one that they either replaced brand new or cleaned up. So we transferred the heat shield over, so this thing's ready to go back in. Let's go ahead and put it all back in, get the top nut across. So we want to go ahead and put this in. We want to get the bottom bolt tightened down too, because you can't reach it once the tensioner's in. So after we do that, we'll put the tensioner in. We know we need to torque this, but since we don't have a torque wrench right now, we're just gonna go ahead and use the breaker bar just to tighten it, make sure this thing doesn't come loose. Top one's a little bit easier, much more access. Just go ahead and get this tight. But if you guys are looking for the foot-pounds on these 14 millimeters are usually about 38 foot-pounds on most of the cars. All right, before we go any further, we want to make sure we get the new belt kind of in place and looped around as much as we can before we put the tensioner in, because once we put the tensioner in, we actually have to put the tension in and slip the belt in correctly. So hopefully you took a picture of how your belt was before you did it. So the trick here is to get the belt around your crank pulley on the engine, and then there's that idler right here. You want to loop it under that idler over your AC compressor down there, and then we'll leave it right here for now before we get the tensioner and everything in, and then we'll pull it right over the tensioner once we get it all set up. So to get the tensioner in, we're going to just slip it underneath the way we took it out earlier. It has to go under that AC line. It's kind of tight, so you got to just kind of wiggle it around and get the wheel through. Yeah, once you get it around that little corner, you get the wheel up first and just line it up in place. So once you get the idler in place, you want to get that lower 12 millimeter in first. That one kind of gets the pivot in place. Make sure your belt and everything is in the right location. Easiest way to thread this all the way through, kind of hold and support the idler and then turn it by hand until you get it close enough where you need a ratchet to tighten it. Once we tighten that lower one, go ahead and get that T50 Torx back into the holder. Again, same with this one. Go ahead and just support it a little bit and then turn it as much as you can by hand before you get the ratchet in there. It is a tight spot, which our ratchet was kind of stuck earlier. Again, this is another one with a long thread that's going to take you forever just to turn it to get it fully tight. Once we get it fully tight, a couple of ugga-muggas with the breaker bar, and we'll have this thing tightened up and ready to go. All right, now that we got it all tightened up, we want to go ahead and get the belt back on. Again, you have to pull the tensioner, which you have to pull it tight to move it inward, and then you want to slip the belt around it. So you want to get the belt in position before you pull this. So the easiest way to get this thing started is to actually wrap it around your tensioner, and then once we pull it back, we'll try to loop the backside here over the alternator wheel, because the alternator wheel is the easiest one to access from this point. All right, we want to all right, then perfect. All right, ooh, you need two hands to do this job. All right, make sure once you get the tensioner on that all your ribs are in place. Make sure these are all lined up, the idler's lined up, the AC compressor's lined up, and everything else. So it looks like everything's in place. So we'll go ahead and replug all the harnesses and start this thing up. Make sure you don't over tighten that nut, just because you don't want to break anything by over tightening that too much. We'll go ahead and screw in those 10 millimeters for the brackets and then start this baby up. So there we have it. Have everything back together, all buttoned up, everything's tightened, plugged in. Go ahead and reconnect the battery, and we'll go ahead and start this up if we have any juice left in the battery. Charging. Right. Up and running. It sounds like everything's running good. We'll go ahead and let this run and charge the battery. So we let it run for a little bit, and now we're hitting about 13 to 13 and a half. It's kind of jumping because I think this thing is dead right now, so it's trying to charge that. But right now, see, it's jumping. It is a good sign that we're getting around 13, because most of the time you want to get about 14 coming out of that. Hey guys, thanks for joining me all the way to the end of this video on putting that alternator in. As you can see, we got everything in and we've got it all running. We're test driving it now just to make sure it charges the battery, but pretty much got everything in. If you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel to stay on top of all my different DIY videos, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, turn on bell notifications to get notified every time I upload a video. For all these different projects, if I can do it, you guys can do it. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.